As a kid, I started out with a 4-door 1970 Ford Torino with a 302 engine in it. That's just the natural evolution in a car. You buy what you can afford and you aspire, if you're a car guy, to get something better. When you get in a Ferrari, just the minute you sit down in one, you begin to understand why. You don't have to know anything about it. It has the ability to talk to you. It has the ability to say, being a car guy, this is something you need to pay attention to. My father was an automotive engineer. He helped me buy my first car. It was $325. It needed everything. As I could afford an alternator, the alternator went on. As I could afford a set of brakes, the brakes went on. As I could afford a set of tires, the tires went on. It became a passion for me at that point, at a young age. Since I learned the respect of everything it took to put a car together and understood the labor that was involved, and it stuck with me for the 60 years. I didn't know when I started out, but I was going down those steps in that path, and that's where I'm at today.
Steve has been able to identify not only some of the most important cars, both from the muscle car era and contemporary exotic cars, but also the cars that are extremely rare and are presented in virtually as new condition.
Every collector of automobiles has something that attracts them. And when I look at Steve's collection, I think I can see instantly what sparks his interest in his collection. Low mileage, high exclusivity, limited production number cars. I also see it's very much technology based. Formula One technology, high-end technology. It's a fantastic collection.
I've tried to simulate and put together the best of the different types of models that I found interesting to my own self. Back in my prior life as a Mopar guy, those were the pinnacle. The wing cars were always the most intriguing cars to have, and the Daytona was the most elusive. Chrysler says that they built 500 examples. I think it's somewhere in the 300 range. That particular example is a beautiful condition. It's a rare car. It's R6 red. They built 8 of those cars in that color combination. It's a one of one as it's formatted with the 440, the 4-speed, the white wing, black interior, bucket seat.
Very desirable, and that car was important because it was a car that was styled for one purpose, and that was to make the very extreme aero package legal for oval tracks due to its very good aerodynamic design. That's going to make this car very, very special. When it comes to Steve's performance cars, vintage muscle cars, certainly the ultimate Mustang is the 1969 and 1970 Boss 429 versions.
There's not that many of those cars. Those are 2 perfect examples. It has an engine that was designed for NASCAR. The blue car has 7,700 actual miles on it. Driver Green is a rare car. I believe it's one of 43 in that color. And being a Boss 429 is something that's just like looking at candy. That's just like jewelry, fine jewelry to look at those cars. And for me anyways, they represent the pinnacle of the muscle car world for Ford.
You know, the only Corvette in Steve's collection is not even arguably the most performance ever available. The 1 year only, 2019 CR1 at 755 horsepower completely reset the bar for Corvette performance. And even to this day, it remains the highest performance Corvette that you could buy. And it's a very highly optioned car, and as is typical with a lot of the cars in his collection, it's red, and it has been lovingly cared for as well.
You can never go wrong with a red car. You might have a poor driving record when it's over with, but you'll never go wrong with it. Has the upgraded interior, there's the 3ZR package. It was just a fun car. I've had about 30 Dodge Challengers in my life, and I got an opportunity to order a Demon. It's quite an upgrade from the the 70s Challengers that I ran around in.
The one-year-only 2018 Dodge Challenger Demon, only 3,000 built for the U.S. market, will be considered the top performance car, perhaps of all time. Don't know if it's ever going to be topped. At 840 horsepower and a right off the showroom floor, 9-second quarter-mile time. It's in the Guinness Book of Records even, where it's the first production car ever to lift the front tires, do a wheelie. The fact that Dodge kept the wraps on that car for as long as they did, made the big announcement in 2018 and stating that it was only going to be a one-year car, only sets this car up to be very collectible going into the future.
When I came to Scottsdale, I saw a lot of different cars on the road, a lot of European sports cars that you wouldn't see in Oklahoma or maybe back east. Being a car guy, it naturally drew my interest and attention. I wanted to learn about them. I wanted to understand what made them what they were. Why did they cost so much money? Why were they so limited production? The more I read and the more I drove them and the more I looked at them, the more I just fell in love with them. And I just thought, well, this would be the natural evolution coming from where we came from in the muscle cars.
When you look at the names of Mercedes-Benz and then unite that with AMG, you know you're onto a winner from the start. And then Mercedes-Benz AMG produced what is known as the Black Series, which is a very limited, high-end, lots of technology on the car. There are very few examples. This car is one of those. But then it goes even further. If you look at the color, typically red is not a color associated with Mercedes. They love the silver arrows, the silver bullet. They love white, they love silver. That's their color. But Mercedes produced just 5 examples in this fire opal red. The car looks beautiful.
I believe Lewis Hamilton, myself, and 3 other lucky individuals have one. That was the natural evolution. That was the limited production car. I believe they built 125 for the world. Any cars, in my mind, that were less than 500 for the world were cars that were important to collect.
One of the highlights of Steve's collection, in my opinion, has to be the 2006 SALEEN. It is really the only true American supercar. There are only 14 examples built, so it's very limited production.
I think the SALEEN S7 is probably the most underrated American car ever produced. I believe the production number for all S7s is 77 cars. Of the twin turbos, this is 14. This is car 74.
It is a twin turbo car. Now, 2 smaller turbos produce a lot more power and suffer from a lot less turbo lag than one big turbo because the mass of the units are dropped down. That's a high technology item that Steve SALEEN wanted to put on the car, and Steve saw that in the car, I believe, and wanted to get involved with it. I understand that.
It's a wonderful car. It's space age. It's modern looking. It has racing lineage in Europe and the United States as well. And it's just a shame that they stopped production. I think the evolution of that car would have been something today.
When I think of Steve's collection in terms of his products produced by Maranello, they are very high-end cars.
If we look at Ferrari history going back 20 years, we've got some of the most rare and significant versions of what already is a storied car. Legendary names such as Superfast and GTO, SUPERAMERICA, Tour de France. All of that means high performance, limited production, very high quality cars that are very, very difficult to get.
Ferrari's philosophy was always, we make road cars to fund the race car project. And they've always had a very tight bond between the two. But what Ferrari now in the 21st century want to do is take all that technology that they've learned over the years in Formula One racing and put as much of it as possible onto their road cars. That's what the customer base wants. And Steve's collection from Maranello represents the pinnacle, the high point of Ferrari technology in the current era.
Anywhere that there was a performance or a handling aspect or speed aspect of the car, I was interested in it. I was interested in it to understand why. Just the minute you sit down in one, you begin to understand why.
Steve's 1992 Testarossa is a very significant car, and there's 2 reasons for that. Primarily, it's because it has the Red Book certification from Maranello. It is an exhaustive look over the car. It's an expensive process, but it's something that a collector of fine Ferrari automobiles wants to have. It makes the car stand out from the rest. And in terms of the car standing out from the rest, this car has won extensive awards at the Cavallino competition.
For me, that was the first car that I paid attention to coming out of the muscle car era via the Miami Vice TV show of the 80s. I think everybody can recall that. And it has 2016 miles on it. It's just a fine example of what a TR ought to be. The 2001 Ferrari 550 Barchetta is a true open-top Ferrari. It's a front-engine V12, manual transmission.
Everything is in the name of this car. This is why Steve is attracted to it, and I get it. And back in the 1950s, one of the first cars that Enzo Ferrari produced was known as the Barchetta. Barchetta in Italian translates as little boat. The car was always designed to be fully open all the time when driving. And in 2001, when Pininfarina was celebrating their 70th anniversary, a 50th celebration with Ferrari as well, they produced, in celebration of that, the Barchetta Pininfarina. Pininfarina is part of the car's name. And what the result was this simply stunning road car. And every collector of fine Ferraris knows the name Barchetta. The fans went crazy for it. Those that could afford it and those that could get hold of it, because the production run was extremely limited.
You know, you put together a V12, a manual transmission, and a no top. It doesn't get any better than that. That's the Ferrari hallmark, right? The 2005 SUPERAMERICA, I just thought that it was a limited production model. It was 549 cars for the world. It was a convertible, electric convertible top. And then you'd never seen anything like that before. So that was the first time I'd ever seen an electrochromatic roof, I believe is what it's called. I like the car, I like the shape, a front engine V12, F1 transmission. I just thought that car was destined for stardom, and it's proved to be. 2009 16M Scuderia is a collaboration between Schumacher and Ferrari. It's the last iteration of the 430 Spider. It's the pinnacle of that make. It's all the bells and whistles, and it has approximately 1,837 miles on it. It's a pretty cool car. That car actually was bought by a gentleman here in Scottsdale who participated in the Mille Miglia. Took delivery of the car in Italy, drove the Mille Miglia there, put it on an aircraft and flew it back home to Scottsdale here. So most of the miles on that car happened in Italy.
Steve's 2018 812 Superfast represents the pinnacle of Ferrari engineering. All the latest Formula One technology in terms of electronic and gadgetry is on that car. The engineers at Maranello set out to make a car that was more drivable than the car that went before, but they didn't want to lose any performance. It's very low mileage, it's highly collectible, there's very few examples in the world. But when you think about that 812, the 8 part of it on that name comes from 800 horsepower. 800 horsepower, V12, thundering Maranello horsepower out of the stable. It is absolutely phenomenal. Gran Turismo Amalgamato, GTO. Any collector of fine Ferraris knows that name. It is a name that has only been used 3 times throughout the long, illustrious history of Maranello. The 250 GTO of 1962, an absolute legendary car which is worth tens of millions of dollars. And then in the 1980s, Ferrari did it again. The 288 GTO, which became an instant legend, and the styling of that based on the 308 series. Again, phenomenally collectible car. And in the later years, Ferrari said, all right, we'll do it one more time. The 599 GTO was born.
They built 599 for the world. And to find an example with 175 miles on it is pretty tough to do too. It's what in my mind, I needed to finish my collection.
Steve's 2016 Tour de France is an absolutely beautiful car from the stables of Maranello. Steve's example was originally owned by Roger Penske, so it's got a great name attached to it for a start. It is a throwback to the 1950s, 1960s era in Maranello, when they used to race the 250 cars in the famed Tour de France motor race. What Ferrari wanted to do with the TDF was give an homage to that wonderful racing heritage. It's something that Ferrari do very well.
It's limited production, of course. It was the final run of the F12 series. As usual with Ferrari, they saved the best for last. They sent their best versions of that car to their best customers. Built 799, I believe, for the world. Car has 400 and something miles on it. It's pristine, like new condition.
Very limited production number of cars. Steve has one of the finest in the world, but the name Tour de France, Ferrari and Roger Penske makes this car an absolute wow of his collection.
I looked at a lot of Cobras over my lifetime and had the opportunity to buy a lot. This car, I looked at it. It's one of the hand-rolled aluminum bodies. It's one of the 2 FAM cars. This is serial number 1010. FAM stands for Ferrari's Ass is Mine. It has Ferrari Russo Corsa paint, and it has the Ferrari leather tan interior in it. And it was Carroll's way of thumbing his nose at Ferrari.
This particular car really stands out as a continuation Cobra because it kind of gives a nod back to the competition that was going on back then of Ferrari and Ford with their Cobra on the road courses.
Has a lot of power, has side pipes, has a Shelby engine in it. It also was originally purchased by Paul Walker.
You've got that connection with Carroll himself with this car, you've got the striking appearance of the car, and then you've got the performance of a lot of modern updates as well. This is going to be a fun car to drive.
I can tell you that these are all good cars. They're all well maintained. I'm passionate about the condition and the overall appearance of those cars, and I think my cars show as well as anybody's.
Mecum's Glendale 2021 auction with Steve's collection is going to be a high point of Mecum's auction history.
These cars are the best of the best. This is what Mecum is known for now. This is what Steve is bringing to the table, and no surprise to me that it's being billed as the main attraction.
I've attended Mecum auctions for a little more than 30 years, and it's amazing to see what it's grown into. It's amazing to see what the car hobby has grown to. These types of cars that I'm selling at Mecum is the natural evolution in the car collecting hobby, I believe, and I think that the Mecum audience and collectors are ready for that. I think they'll make great examples in anybody's collection.